Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I'll Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And welcome to a Monday Mini. Content warning before we get into this. We are going to be talking about abortions and death. So if you're not in space for that today, totally understand. But this is really important. We're going to have to come back and talk about it a lot because we're being very specific in this episode about our home state of Georgia. It's also kind of a rapidly evolving situation.
Mm-hmm.
So today is October 4th, 2024. But I wrote this, we put together this outline, I think September 30th. I checked to see if there were other updates, but
right.
Things are changing.
Constantly.
Yes. So today we're going to be talking about abortion and specifically what's going on in our home state of Georgia, where in 2022, a 6-week abortion ban was enacted. And you've probably heard, but recently the deaths of 2 women were attributed to delays in emergency medical care due to the state's abortion bans. And experts maintain these deaths were preventable. And there's a lot to break down here, so let's look into it. 28-year-old Amber Nicole Thurman took abortion pills and suffered a rare complication where her body didn't get rid of all of the fetal tissue. She went to the hospital for a routine procedure called a dilation and curettage, or a D&C, something the hospital could completely treat. However, earlier in 2022, Georgia had enacted an abortion ban that made D&Cs almost completely illegal, with only a few exceptions. Doctors who performed the procedure could face up to a decade in jail. So Thurman waited in the hospital bed in pain as her infection worsened and her organs failed. For 20 hours, she waited before the operation finally started, but at that point it was too late and she died. Thurman had decided on an abortion soon after she found out she was pregnant. However, her pregnancy just passed the 6-week deadline that was put into effect on July 20th, 2022. She hoped that the ban would be overturned so she could get an abortion close to home. But when that didn't happen over the next few weeks, she decided to go to North Carolina, where her abortion would still be legal. However, the clinic was overwhelmed with people trying to get health care in the wake of other bans, and she missed her slot. She was instead prescribed a medical 2-pill abortion, completely legal, completely safe. Because taking the day off and dealing with protesters had been costly and an ordeal, Thurman signed a release that she understood she'd need to go to the emergency room on the off chance that something went wrong. She took the pills as instructed. When she started noticing symptoms, the clinic in North Carolina would have performed the procedure she needed in an hour for free, but she wasn't in North Carolina anymore. Just a note, deaths due to complications of these pills are extremely rare. From 2000 to 2024, over 6 million American women have taken mifepristone, and only 32 deaths were reported to the FDA. Only 32. Many of the deaths involved sepsis or things like drug overdoses, intentional or accidental. So, after her death, a state committee of experts, including 10 doctors, determined that her death was preventable and that this delay was a, quote, large reason she died. The committee's job is to improve maternal health by looking into pregnancy-related deaths. So that's why they were looking into it. While their reviews aren't public, news outlets like ProPublica have confirmed at least 2 other women have died because Georgia's abortion bans have prevented them from accessing the care that they need in a timely manner. There are almost certainly more, especially because a lot of these committees have a lag of up to 2 years, which is why we're hearing about this now. This means we could be seeing a lot more stories coming out since the overturning of Roe v. Wade soon. Thurman's is being called the first official case of a preventable abortion-related death since then, since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And this is what medical experts warned would happen, even though Republican lawmakers pushing for these bans often point to exceptions for the life of the mother. This ignores how bodies work and how medicine works. It's also just cruel and pointless. because you're just waiting to see if it gets worse. Why? And of course, medical practitioners are worried about being prosecuted. So that adds a whole nother layer. People have been turned away and told to come back when they're worse or, quote, crashing. Even when the pregnancy isn't viable, even when it endangers lives. Yep, that's dangerous. Also, by the time Thurman went to the hospital, she had vomited blood and passed out. And I don't know how much worse you have to get. The report on her death deemed it should have been immediately clear that she was in danger. She was diagnosed with acute severe sepsis at around 9:30 p.m., but she didn't receive treatment until the next day. A D&C was discussed multiple times before she died. So they knew this was a thing, but they were worried about performing it. The hospital did not have clear instructions on how to interpret the law, and a lot of the wording is disturbingly vague. So they weren't sure how much in danger does she have to be? According to ProPublica, the availability of D&Cs after Roe v. Wade decreased the maternal death rate for women of color by up to 40%. And Georgia has one of the country's highest maternal death rates, and Black women are 3 times more at risk than white women. Maternal death rates are going up. That's part of the reason this committee exists. When asked to comment, Republican officials said it was part of a fear-mongering campaign. In light of all of this, on September 30th, 2024, a judge in Georgia struck down the state's 6-week abortion law. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney wrote, "Liberty in Georgia includes in its meaning, in its protections, and in its bundle of rights the power of a woman to control her own body, to decide what happens to it and in it, and to reject state interference with her healthcare choices. When a fetus growing inside a woman reaches viability, when society can assume care and responsibility for that separate life, then and only then may society intervene. An arbitrary 6-week ban on post-embryonic cardiac activity pregnancy terminations is inconsistent with these rights and the proper balance that a viability rule establishes between a woman's rights of liberty and privacy and society's interest in protecting and caring for unborn infants." So his new ruling would allow abortions for up to 20 weeks, which is what it was. An appeal has already been announced, though, because, but if it stands, it could open the doors for a similar overturning in nearby states, because here in the South, it's part of the issue is a lot of neighboring states have similar things, so you have to travel pretty far to get one. At the same time, people in Georgia, both providers and otherwise, have spoken about how much the uncertainty weighs on them. So performing abortions, who knows how long we could be doing this. Before the ban was enacted, there was an estimated 4,400 abortions a month in Georgia, and after it was enacted, it's about 2,400. The legal challenge that led to this overturning was brought by Sister Song, Women of Color Reproductive Collective, against the state of Georgia. So even if things can feel hopeless, there are people doing this work, and things can be changed. The executive director of Sister Song, Monica Simpson, said, "Today's win was hard fought and is a significant step in the right direction towards achieving reproductive justice in Georgia. We are encouraged that a Georgia court has ruled for bodily autonomy." So I think we're going to see a lot more stories about this in the coming weeks.
It's already being challenged right now. Yeah. So I have a feeling this is going to lead up to Supreme Court hearing again, maybe.
Yep.
But again, just like you said, that this is the good news that it will continue to be challenged. Unfortunately, it's at the cost of women's lives.
Yep.
I know not too long ago, the parents of Amber was loud about how she is not a statistic and that this was preventable and this is a heinous way of losing their child. Because again, it was an easy procedure. It should not have happened. And we've seen this all over the country. We've seen more and more women being charged for murder with miscarriages as well. There's a lot happening that we can't. God, it's constant. It's definitely constant. I have seen about abortion being on the ballot in Georgia.
Oh, because it's not currently, but is it? They're going to put it on the ballot?
I think there's a whole conversation. And I know Florida for sure is having a conversation, and they are pushing to have that on the ballot. And most of the citizens of Florida are like, yeah, we want it. But DeSantis is like fighting hard against it. I believe it's being talked about in Georgia. There's a lot happening. We know this as a newly purple state, that we are having to fight so much. And we say, as in like the collective state of Georgia, there's also just been a hurricane that has caused massive havoc on the southeast, including areas of Georgia. Atlanta, Augusta was hit really hard, which is south of Atlanta. But there's a lot happening, and including our Board of Elections and voter registration being constantly challenged because they are trying to do hand ballots, hand counts. They are trying to already disenfranchise so many people. Our deadline, registration deadline is coming up, and they've done a lot to kid out a lot of voters. Like, it is high. Like, I'm almost, I guess, just to be too real, lost hope in Georgia, not because of the people of Georgia, but because of the corruption that has happened in the board, even to the point that our leaders are afraid to do either way. Like, they're not condemning anything, and they're not approving of anything. So it's a show essentially down here. And a lot of this, also the abortion stuff, it is a lot. It is a lot happening here.
It is. It is, but definitely check out if this is something that's important to you. Check out organizations who are doing work like this. Check to see if you're registered to vote. Even if you think you are, check again. But yeah, we're going to have to come back and talk about this because, like I said, this is pretty specific to our region, but it's happening. It's happening everywhere, and not just in the US, unfortunately. But yeah. If you listeners, if you have any resources or any organizations we should check out, if you've seen anything where you are, wherever that is, that we should be talking about, please let us know. You can email us at stephanieandmomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff Mom Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store, and we have a book where we do talk about abortion. You can get wherever you get your books. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
Thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.